command, location, selection, anything specific?
No, I thought it generally sucked. I didn't think it was a specific suck. I thought it was like an all-encompassing type of suck. So, we're going to try and rectify that. But for right now, I'm going to be pretty pissed about it.
Where do you kind of go from here? Is it looking at tape? Is it going through mechanics? Where do you kind of go from here?
You tell me. I've tried that. If you got an answer, I'd love to hear. Just, not going to let it beat me up for, I'll maybe give it till 10. It's 9:44 right now. We'll give it 16 minutes of sulk, and then we'll, get back on the bump and figure it out.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the pod. I'm your host, Joey Velez. Today, we're going to be joined by a colleague of mine. Her name is Siana Sylvester. She is from the Long Island area. She has her own private practice called My Mental Flex. She is the director of organizational mental performance for a government and commercial contracting firm. And she spent a lot of time working with a lot of different athletes from various sports, baseball, softball, ice hockey, to name a few. She's worked in the corporate industry. She's worked in the athletic field. She's worked in the realm of sales, injury rehabilitation, how to come back from injury. So she's got a lot of experience in a lot of different areas. So I wanted to bring her on so that we can review the video you just watched, which is from a baseball game earlier this season, and how to handle failure. And we talk about that. We talk about how to control the controllables. How do you handle not playing? A variety of topics. So stay tuned, like, subscribe, comment, rate, review, not only before, but after you're done watching the pod. Let us know what you think. And I hope you enjoy.
Hey,
What up?
how
How
are
you doing?
you?
I'm good. How's it going over there?
It's going. Dude, you're like me. You just jump from thing to thing. Huh?
I treat my break, like my drive back from work to here, is like that's my break.
Oh,
Rock out to some
hey.
NSYNC, some Drake.
Oh, NSYNC and Drake. What a lineup.
Yeah, wild variety. Uh,
Okay.
you have dogs, right? You have a
I
dog?
do. I do. Hopefully she doesn't totally derail us, but she's sitting next to me.
Oh yeah, I'll have a co-host hop on at some point because
That's fine.
can't go past 5 minutes without paying attention to him.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, she's looking right at me.
she's waiting.
There she is.
Oh, look at that, dude. She's waiting
There
for it.
she is. She's ready.
What are you doing? Why aren't you paying attention to me?
Yeah.
Uh,
She
I
just grills me
know,
all day.
I know when I get home, like there's that instant rush of excitement.
Mm-hmm.
So coming
Mm-hmm.
home now, I was like, hey man, you need to chill this out for about an hour. Like here's your 1, 2, good boys, and then now you need to move on.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
he's welcome to join. I'm excited to see him.
Oh yeah, no, he'll definitely do it for sure. And I think he's already I just made his space. That's why I moved that pillow. Um, yeah. So
Great.
what's the weather like up by you? Because full blown disclaimer for this episode, if the power goes out and I just randomly cut out, that might be a
Nope.
thing.
We
Stormy
can
weather,
re-record
apparently.
if that's the
Yeah,
case. It's all
yeah.
right. Don't worry.
We'll lift and shift. But what's the weather like up by you?
I wanna rub it in. It's beautiful here. It's like 75, sunny, breezy,
That's fine.
gorgeous.
That's okay. That's not nice or anything.
Sorry.
Well, look, thank you for hopping on. I don't know, we didn't really talk. I don't know if I talked about this beforehand, but I think you're the first person I've had on here that I don't really know.
Oh,
Obviously we've done
cool.
like obviously we've done our background. We had the initial conversation, but like, you're the first person that just randomly was like, "Hey, I think this is a good idea. Let's do this."
Oh, good.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I've obviously follow you on Instagram. We know some of the same people, so I've seen your content out there. So I figured, okay, like I think this will work, and I think I need to have you on here to get your experience on things. So I appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so honored to be the first person that you don't really know to do this. And I'm excited. It's gonna be awesome.
Heck yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you do. I know you have your own company, My Mental Flex. I know you work for a government and commercial contracting firm doing the sports psychology work. Yeah, what's a day in the life like for you as a mental performance consultant?
Yeah, so my name is Siana Sylvester, and I have a background in sport and performance psychology. I began my career at Springfield College, where I studied athletic counseling. Most people know it as the birthplace of basketball. Trained under two pretty big leaders in the field, Dr. Judy Van Ralt, who's like a big name in the self-talk research world, and then Dr. Britt Brewer, who's another big name in the sport injury research world. While I was there, I earned all of my CMPC hours. That program prepared me very well. I worked mostly with baseball, softball teams. Trinity College was one of them. Went over to the Collegiate Baseball League of Europe, worked with the Cape Cod Baseball League, and then also worked in their sport injury clinic. So I worked with a
Okay.
variety of different collegiate athletes while I was there. Did some ice hockey, women's ice hockey at Harvard and also at Smith College. So really just all over the place. Graduated with all of my hours for CMPC, and at the time, CMPC wasn't really that big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I graduated from Springfield, moved over to New York, got my first job at the NFL. I worked in their player engagement department, really just helping athletes transition into and out of the game of professional sport. So I was over at the league office doing that. Then I took a dip into education for a couple of years where I ran a international student program at a large high school here on Long Island. There's about 2,500 students there. I was
Oh wow.
responsible for 300 students. Had my first real taste of leadership. I had done some leadership stuff before that, but I was the center director there,
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
I had about 10 direct reports. And so I had my first taste of what it was like to lead a team. And then Higher Echelon, which is my day job, getting back to your question here, where I serve as the director of mental performance. And we do a lot of work with government and commercial contracts. So whether that's military, like Army and Navy, or things like NASA or Department of Homeland Security is
Hmm.
actually where I got my first role here at Higher Echelon
Oh
under
nice.
TSA. We worked across 8 different airports. Another one of your guests was part of that. Drew Morgan,
Yeah.
big name in the field who I respect very much. And him and I were both on that TSA contract where we provided cognitive skills training for TSA officers, helping them better scan, identify, and decide on threats so that they could be more vigilant. So a lot of different avenues to apply sport and performance
Yeah.
psychology. Most of what I do now is more in the business and the leadership realm, treating leadership like a performance in the day job at Higher Echelon. And then I started my own mental flex practice 2 years ago, really because here on Long Island, there are so many athletes and that there's not enough access to sport and performance psych
Hmm.
services. And I found that there was a need for it, and there wasn't a company to work for here that did it. So
Yeah.
I created my own on a
Heck
whim, really,
yeah.
a couple of years ago. So it's been going
Nice.
well, and it's exciting.
And well traveled within the field. It sounds like you've had your hand in like a variety of different environments for sure. Like, I mean, your I guess quote unquote regular sports, right? Like in the business world, the military. Uh what sort of what did you see from like the injury side? Did you do a lot of like work with athletes on like coming back from injury?
Yeah, so when I was at Springfield College, I still do a lot of work with athletes who are
Hmm.
recovering from injury now, but at Springfield College, I was embedded in the athletic training room.
Okay.
So all athletes who experience some level of injury would do their rehab in there. And this was a really cool experience because I got to work side by side with the athletic trainers, strength and conditioning staff, and the athletic coaches. So this was more of like a holistic approach to psychological readiness to return to sports. So oftentimes you see that athletes physically are cleared, they're medically given the go ahead. Hey, you're ready to start. And what you see is that there's a lot of hesitation when they get back to the field,
Mm,
or are you sure I'm ready? Like, I don't think I can trust my knee, someone recovering from an ACL injury. And so something that we would work with them on was how do we teach you some mental performance skills so that we can increase your likelihood of feeling psychologically ready to get back to
yeah.
sport when you're medically cleared. So we were really embedded with the player from the moment they started in the AT room through when they were medically cleared. We are working with them in their strength and conditioning sessions. So we call these like turf talks sometimes,
I like
where
that.
you're going in, you're doing a very brief solution focused intervention. And then you're also doing some reflection exercises and goal setting with them, like either before or after their session with the AT or the strength and conditioning staff. So
Okay.
that's been my like logistical experience.
Mm,
I do still do a lot with athletes who are returning from injury,
yeah.
who maybe have a fear of re-injury. They play small, they hesitate, they're not sure. Um, they've got a lot of internal blocks that get in their way of performing their best.
Yeah.
And so we work a lot on that too.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, you've obviously experienced going through the field, but I didn't realize it growing up playing sports, but like no matter which way you look at it, it's not all physical, it's not all cognitive. Like there's a mixture of both in whatever you do, whether it's trying to achieve high performance or like you said, coming back from injury. You could be physically cleared, but that doesn't mean that like you're mentally ready to go. So like even vice versa, like yeah, maybe I mentally feel good about myself, but like no, your body is telling me right now that like it's not time yet. So having that balance of working on both the physical and mental component of you know all of it, injury,
Yeah.
playing at a high level, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point here too, because one side of it is, are they scared to go back? But the other side is, I'm itching to go back. Mentally, I'm ready to go back, but physically, I'm not cleared. So I've conversations with athletes who say, oh, well, they said I could start doing this motion on this date, but I think I'm going to try it this weekend, even though they told me to wait until Tuesday.
Yeah.
Right. And so then we've got to have a different type of conversation than we would if we're trying to build that confidence and that trust and that psychological safety to go back. This all started for me back in high school. I was a competitive cheerleader. I hyperextended my elbow
Oof.
doing a round off back handspring. This was a standard skill, but it was really a freak accident. And I
Yeah.
never psychologically got over that. I was physically cleared to go back, but psychologically, I just could never get back to there. I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist. I thought that was super cool. And then took one sport injury and really one psych class and changed the entire direction that, nothing happens separate from mindset. I heard this first from Dr. Kellen
Yeah.
Lee, who's over at the Mariners. He uses this phrase all the time, that nothing happens separate from mindset. And that is just so abundantly clear
Yeah.
to me, that you can't recover from injury without also training your mind, whether that's a novice and you're doing it on your own through trial and error or with a trained mental performance consultant.
Yeah. Um, shout out Kellen. Shout out Kellen. Shout out Drew. I'm loving the name
I
drops
know.
right now. I
Here
love
we
those
go.
guys. But yeah, I think it's like, you know, people will often say like I wasn't thinking, I don't have a thought, like I don't know why I did that. I think oftentimes it's like, yeah, like you said, there's something mental tied to it. Yeah, you can't properly recover physically if you're also not recovering properly mentally, whether that's from injury or just from like the day's performance, right? And like I'm sure you've probably experienced this too, and this is a conversation I have a lot, but oftentimes when it comes to like high level performance, what's the first thing people sacrifice is like some sort of recovery.
Oh
Whether it's
yeah.
physical, whether it's mental, like you need to have that recovery period to help set you up for the next day. And then even thinking about pushing yourself coming back too fast from an injury, I always think of like, yeah, I was cleared to jog, but I think I might go do sprints instead. It's like,
Hmm.
why? Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Like, we don't need to be
Yeah.
doing that.
I mean, we live in a culture where rest is weakness. It's
Yeah,
considered soft, right? And
yeah,
so recovery isn't prioritized. And I heard this story the other day. I shared it on my Instagram where, there's two lumberjacks who go out into the forest, and one lumberjack, they're both super strong and they chop wood at the same pace. And at the end of the day, they always have the same amount of wood. The difference is that the second lumberjack goes home for lunch, takes the lunch break, and he sharpens his axe. And then he comes back after taking a break and he chops some more wood. And for some reason, at the end of the day, they both have the same amount of wood. And so I share this story with athletes to think, how could you sharpen your axe? How
yeah,
could you take a moment? What would it be like to take a pause? How would taking that pause help you perform better instead of the mindset of taking this pause means that I'm not working hard enough.
yeah,
I feel guilty. I feel shame. I shouldn't be resting. There's something wrong with me. My value comes from the amount that I produce. But what if we flip that script and we think about how would taking this pause, how would resetting, how would taking a breath, insert whatever mental skill you want to
Yeah.
there, help you perform better, especially when it matters the most?
Yeah, and I think I had this conversation at work the other day with a group. I was teaching a class on mindfulness, and that same thing, I ran through a brief 5 minute mindfulness practice focusing on breathing, and then we're
Mm.
debriefing it and asked about what are the challenges of it. Someone says like, I could be doing something else. Like not necessarily towards me, but he was like, why don't I do it? Because I could easily be doing something else. And sure, makes sense, right? Like you got to study, you got to do this, you got to do that. Totally makes sense. But like allowing yourself just that 5 minute break is going to make all these other things a lot more efficient, right? And a lot of the research with
Yeah.
mindfulness is like how it can help something like learning, right? If my mind's going 100 miles an hour and I don't break from one thing to the next and I go study, well, how much of that information am I now retaining?
Oh,
Right. So
yeah.
it's like, yeah, just the benefit of just taking a couple of minutes to yourself. What can that do?
Yeah. I mean, I think the population that you're working with, and just generally, we have to, as mental performance consultants, shift our language a little bit
Yep.
sometimes. So
Yep.
to us, it's a deep breath, right? But to them, maybe it's combat breathing.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Or maybe it's a tactical pause, or maybe it's a game time pause. And we use a little bit different language. And I'm sure that you also do that in your practice. But something that I notice is we've got to cultivate some buy-in. So,
Yep.
yes, mindfulness is the act of paying attention in the present moment on purpose and non-judgmentally, right? A lot of people associate mindfulness with meditation.
Yep.
So, meditation is a tool that you can use to achieve a mindful state. So, what would it be like if you spent less time comparing yourself to other people that you're performing against, or comparing yourself to your opponent, or comparing yourself to your backup or the starter in the
Yeah.
lineup? If you spent less time doing that, how would you perform better? If you were able to let go of the last play or stop thinking about the next play and just play one play at a time, how would you perform better? So sometimes I find that if I can get some buy-in for how it would actually help them, they're more willing to try it. But I completely agree with you. There's always those people who are resistant
Yeah.
to practicing any type of mental skills, and they're just not ready for it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, the power of the words you use. I heard one of my coworkers say it, and I kept using it afterwards. But yeah, uh, in talking about breathing, yeah, how to weaponize your breath. People are like, oh
Hmm.
shit, dang, yeah, tactical
Hmm.
pause, right? Like combat breathing, like that kind of jives with people, and
Yeah,
it sounds less. I don't want to say less gimmicky, but it sounds like it's something
less
more that I'd be interested
kumbaya.
in doing. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, right.
yeah.
You said that I want to go back to this because like you talked about like yeah, the hyperextended elbow, right? And then even just taking like one sports like or one psychology class kind of made you have a little career shift. I was in an exercise physiology class trying to be, going down the kinesiology realm and then read a paragraph on sports psychology and then that kind of flipped my path because then it got me
Ooh.
thinking about who I was in high school playing basketball. So like my junior year, and I think we talked about this a little bit. My junior year, I played basketball with all my best friends. I wasn't going to play a lot because I had a lot of people in front of me. Took the mindset of let me just do what I can. You know,
Hmm.
Senior year, less people in front of me, same best friends. Now we're talking on the approach of like, why am I not playing? Why does this person not like me? What am I doing wrong? Complete mental shift that got me in the field. Is your injury, is that kind of what led you down this path? Or is there
Yeah,
another?
I think that is what led me down this path, because I really believe that if I had a CMPC working with me when I was in high school, that I could have overcame some of that internal fear.
Mhm.
I was very attached to the fear. And so in psychology, we call this cognitive fusion, right? We hear a lot about this in ACT and acceptance, commitment, therapy. And this has a lot to do with mindfulness, being able to diffuse and not say, I'm scared. Instead, oh, there's fear.
Yeah.
Now we're not so attached to it. There's more distance between that. And that's a skill, being able to notice, okay, I'm feeling a lot of fear right now. I'm feeling really nervous and scared to do this skill, round up back handspring in my case,
Yeah.
right? How could I shift into a pre performance routine and use of a visualization or an imagery that would be a much more productive way to prepare to do that skill than, oh my gosh, I'm really scared. I don't know if I can do this. What if
Yeah.
I don't get this back? What if I hurt myself again? Right? All those unproductive thoughts are really normal and human. There's nothing wrong with having them. It's just they're not really helpful for
Yeah.
performance.
Yeah.
And when we give the brain something to go to in those moments of stress, when we practice them when we're not stressed, and then we have something to go to when we're under stress, we're more likely to commit to that other mental plan than the default of, I'm really scared. I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just the way our mind works, right? In that default mode, we tend to go towards more of those self-related, self-directed thoughts, right? And I think, yeah, you
Yeah.
touched on a great, just the simple act of detaching from it. So say like, yeah, I'm scared right now versus like I'm experiencing feelings of this, right?
Mhm.
Even just something as simple as that can help you, like give you that little nudge that you need to kind of make sure you put your best foot forward. And it's something that we don't really something we definitely have to teach, right? Because no one ever taught us that growing up, right? It's like
No,
we're just experiencing
no.
the emotion. Oh, that's who I am, right? Like I'm sad right
Mhm.
now, therefore I'm a sad person, sort of thing,
Yeah.
you know?
Most of us are living in a world of automatic thoughts,
Yeah,
right? Like there was a one Harvard study that said we have 70,000 thoughts a day, and almost 50% of the time we're not thinking about what's happening in the present moment.
yeah,
So we're having 70,000 thoughts. Can you imagine if you were aware of all of those thoughts? You would
yeah,
really be very noisy in there.
yeah,
And so our brain tunes out a lot of the stuff that doesn't matter. But I agree with you. It's a skill to pay attention to what are our warning signals, especially when it comes to performance, when we're starting to deviate away from what works for us.
yeah,
Right. So a baseball player who's getting ready to step into the box, who has the thought, I don't want to go 0 for 3 today. I don't want to go 0 for 3 today. Well, normal thought. Of
yeah.
course, results
Oh,
really
I
matter.
don't
And
think you would want to in that situation,
yeah,
right? Like,
and you want to keep your spot in the lineup and you want
yeah,
to perform well. And maybe you've got a coach there who's recruiting you, who's watching you, and there's a lot of pressure. Maybe it's a big game, it's the championship game, whatever those situational environmental factors are. And then if you're having these automatic thoughts that you don't know you're having, you can't do anything about it.
yeah,
You just go up there and you crap your pants and you swing at pitches that you know you can hit,
yeah,
and you walk away and you're pissed off that you didn't rise to the pressure. And what we get to do as mental performance consultants is help you figure out what are those warning signals for you, and then create a game plan so that you're not so freaked out when they show up. Like I actually was expecting to have the thought that I was going to go 0 for 3 today.
yeah,
But this time I stepped out of the box. I took a deep breath. I stepped back in. I've got a intentional instructional cue, loose hands up the middle, see the ball hit the ball, and I executed my performance. That's a skill, being able to notice that those thoughts are there and then committing to a mental plan to navigate around them.
yeah. Yeah, and I think a big part of that too is normalizing, because you said it, just normalizing what it is that you're thinking. Because if I'm a batter and I'm up there and I'm 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts, of course I don't want to go 0 for 3, right? Like, of course that thought's going to pop in my head. I don't think it's about avoiding that thought. You're not going to.
Definitely not.
I had that conversation with people today, like in terms of like working memory, because we're talking about mindfulness.
Mhm.
Like, if you, with everything you paid attention to throughout your day, if your brain held on to every single thing, that would be draining. And it'd be a
Oh,
lot harder
yeah.
for you to access the information you need. Same thing like with you. If I paid attention to every single thought that I had throughout the day, it's gonna it's gonna be draining. It's gonna be hard to focus on what I need to focus on. Right. So it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, when I have those thoughts that are coming up of like, I don't want to go for 3. Okay, now that I know that it's gonna happen, now I can implement here's what I'm gonna do to handle that situation. You
Yeah,
know?
and what I love is that you got rid of the judgment there, which is part of the mindfulness. Like, there's something wrong with me for having this thought.
Yeah.
That's a big myth in sports psych that, oh, if I work with a mental performance coach, like I'm never going to have a negative thought again. Like, no, actually, that's not our goal at all. The brain
Yeah.
is not wired to work that way. It's
Yeah.
always searching for threats. Your brain's number one job is to keep you safe. So it is always looking for a threat, whether that's an internal threat that you've created that doesn't actually exist, right? The story I tell myself is if I go 0 for 3 today, like I'm a terrible baseball player, and like your body is responding to that stress like you're going to die from
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
consequence, even though you're not actually going to die if you strike out. Okay.
Yeah.
But we feel like it in those moments. And so this is an opportunity for you to notice that you're having thoughts that are triggering your stress response, a normal human experience. There's nothing wrong with you for having the negative thought. But what a high performer is able to do is commit to a mental plan, lower that cognitive load, right? And pay attention to thoughts that are helpful and productive
Yeah.
instead of all those automatic negative thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that kind of ties in a little bit to the conversation we had beforehand because we both work with softball players.
Mhm.
We both work in that sport. There's again, it's natural for any sport, but then the natural tendency to focus on things that are outside of my control, right?
Mhm.
Especially when it comes to something like playing time, which is something I directly dealt with in high school, right? It was like I wasn't playing, and now it's what am I doing wrong? Why isn't he playing me? Like, why isn't this happening? Why isn't any of these things happening when
Mhm.
I could have directed my attention elsewhere, at the very least, doing what I did the year prior. Let me just do what I can to help my team. Right. So what do you see from those that you work with? How would you work with somebody on, dealing with that sort of challenge?
Yeah, I saw this a lot in the last basketball season, um, with women's college basketball
Mm,
players who were recruited. They had scholarships, they're like mid-classmen, so they're not freshmen, they're not brand new to the team. They've maybe put a year or two in, and they're on full scholarship, so they expect to play. They're
yeah.
like, I was recruited with the promise that like I'm going to be starting games, and they got into that trap, that thinking trap that why isn't coach playing me? What's wrong with me? This coach doesn't know what they're doing.
Yep.
And again, there's nothing wrong with you for having these thoughts. Anybody in that situation who just got recruited is on full scholarship at a college basketball program. It makes perfect sense that you
Yeah.
feel like you should play. Completely get that. Um, but we're not attached to the right things in
Yeah.
those moments. And those thoughts are really super distracting for one enjoyment in sport. Like who's having fun when they're pissed off with how much playing time they're not getting?
Yeah.
That's not fun at all for
No.
anybody. So you're not having any fun. You're not committed to getting better because you feel like maybe you are entitled to be playing with the talent level you're at. And so, for example, some players um they'd ride the bench most of the game. Maybe they get in 1 or 2 minutes at the end or right at the end of the second quarter, right before half. And one of the feedbacks that their coach would give them was, you've got to get faster. So you didn't play the whole game. You sat on the bench for probably about 2 hours. And what did you do after the game? You went home. You either went to your hotel or you went home to your dorm and you sat around and you were pissed off that you didn't play and that you should be playing over this person and so forth.
Yep.
But you've been given the feedback that you need to get faster. So a behavior that would be more aligned with earning playing time would be going out for a run,
Yeah.
right? Or going into the gym and working on cardio, or asking another girl on your team, maybe who didn't play, hey, do you want to guard me? Right? So there's other productive behaviors that are better aligned with what's important to you, because what you're telling me is important to you is playing time, but what your actions are, they're not aligned with that. And so one way that I help players kind of overcome this very valid frustration is, what is your mission? What kind of season do you want to have? What's important to you? What kind of
Yeah.
player do you want to be at the end of this season? Getting back to the mission. Why do I play? What process steps that are within your control that can help get you there, right? You don't make the starting lineup. You don't decide who gets subbed in and out. You don't
Yeah.
decide who gets injured, right? There's an opportunity. There could be an opportunity knocking on your door, unfortunately, due to somebody's
Yeah.
injury. And are you mentally ready to go into the game? Or are you
Yeah.
sitting there pissed off on the bench because you didn't start today?
Yeah, because then what happens there too, if you get that opportunity, you're sitting there pissed off. It's like, oh, now I have to perform well, and now you're just adding more
Mm-hmm.
pressure to the situation. you
That's
know?
exactly what happens, right? Because they go, like let's say that opportunity comes in, somebody gets subbed out, you're not expecting to go in, or somebody gets injured, you're not expecting to go in, or someone doesn't show up, they're sick that day, you're not expecting to go in. And your body is tense, your mind is flustered, it's very noisy. And then you get the opportunity to go in and you tell yourself, I have to perform well or I'm never going to get this opportunity again.
Yeah.
Right? You put some level of self pressure on yourself, which typically leads to worse performance, right? Try harder doesn't work.
Yeah.
If it worked, we'd all be great by now. And so there's something to helping players just come back to the present moment, just coming back into this mindfulness, focusing on the game. What can I learn from today? How can I grow from sitting on the bench? How can I be a better teammate? How can I stay connected to my mission? How can I practice noticing, oh, I'm getting really hooked on what coach is doing. What's actually happening in the game right now? What could I learn? All those things would be a much better use of your time than getting stuck in that thought trap of not playing.
Yeah. And I would be more concerned if like you lost your starting spot and you're like, hey, it's all good. No worries. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
okay, like that's weird. But yeah, I had a conversation. So I had a basketball trainer back home on here for like one of my second or third episodes, and he talked about the same thing, kind of like when you get to the next level, like, hey, yeah, in your area in high school, you might be the best player, but when you get to that next level, like you're just another dude. So it's like, what are you gonna do to kind of separate yourself, right? So you're not gonna get the same amount of minutes, most likely. You're not gonna get the same amount of leeway that you probably did to the lower level. But how are you going to interpret those situations, right? Like if I lose my starting spot for whatever reason, and I've had this conversation with people before, what makes you think that sitting and sulking or complaining is what's going to get you back into the starting lineup? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know. It's like you don't control that, right? It's like, what can we do instead? You know, what behaviors are aligned with not just who you are, but like with who somebody a coach wants to play, right? Like sometimes they'll even
Mhm.
throw that out there too, you know. But
Yeah,
yeah, how do we
it's
get you
funny you
to?
say that with the relationship with the coach, right? It's like this coach just sucks. Like they are the worst. Like nobody likes them. Nobody on the team likes them. They're just mean, blah, blah, blah. And they play favorites. Well, what are those favorited players doing? Well, they're building a relationship with the coach. And one of the questions that I often ask, and I ask this with leaders too, is who benefits more from the relationship with the coach and the player? Well, ultimately, you as the player benefit more from the coach favoring you than the
Yeah,
coach benefits from playing you. So the same is true in leadership, right? If you are trying to manage up with a boss who kind of stinks, maybe they're micromanaging or maybe they're laissez-faire and they're never around and they give you no direction and it's super frustrating. How do you build that relationship? It benefits you more as the employee to build that relationship than it does for the boss to build it with you. Now, the best leaders think about this a little bit differently, but
yeah,
helping give back the control to the individual contributor, that how could building a relationship with this coach that you don't really like help you get more playing time, right? And it might sound manipulative, but it's really more about influence,
yeah,
right? How can you play the game a little bit so that you're not sitting in the dugout all pissed off that you're not playing today? Or could you give a different level of body language, be engaged, cheering on your teammates, helping like go get the bat, go get the foul balls? That shows initiative. That shows that you want to be here.
yeah,
You sitting on the end of the bench having a pity party doesn't really look like you want to be here.
yeah.
And I
To me,
think
it's like,
most coaches are turned off by that behavior.
yeah, and like I've been a head coach before too, and like I'll look onto the bench to see who I want to bring in, and the kid I just pulled who's sitting there like this, what makes me think you're ready to go back in? Like, no, go to this person, you know.
Hmm.
uh I had my last job, I had an old coworker who like she was deemed like the favorite of the boss, and I was like, well, yeah, like she busts her ass, like she works hard, she knows what she's doing, she like communicates, she takes initiative. Why would he not offer her up for like every opportunity? Like you're not doing any of that. Like I think
Yeah,
favoritism is a real thing, but it's not because like I like this person better always. It's usually because like this person's doing what I need them to do and I know they'll do it, so let me choose them, you know.
yeah. And I think with with leadership, it's do you as a leader value competence, right? I know in high pressure situations, Johnny's a real, there's something about Johnny that really pisses me off, but I know when I put him in this situation, he's going to deliver,
Yeah.
right? So that's competence. I know that this player can handle this. And then there's also character, right? And so your character is, who are you when nobody's looking?
Yeah.
What kind of player, what kind of teammate are you? So am I going to value character? Am I going to give this person who looks ready, who's engaged and ready to be here, this opportunity? Or am I going to only give it to the people who demonstrate some level of competence? And this comes down to like team culture. It can really
Yeah.
influence team culture a lot, that if the best player on the team always shows up late and always starts, what kind of culture do you have?
Yeah.
Right? But they're super competent and I know that they should play, versus the kid that's always there early, shows up early, he's always dressed, ready to go. Maybe he's picking up the water bottles after. Does that earn playing time? And that really depends on the culture that the coach creates.
Yeah, I think I talked a lot about that in terms of like trust back with military, and it's the trust is built off of like three foundations: so confidence, character, and then commitment. But then
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, which one do you value? Which one do you weigh more? Like, yeah, this person is really competent at their job, but their character is absolute crap. Like, do I still trust that person? Right. So the same thing. It's like
Mm-hmm.
this person's terrible at their job, but they're a good person, and I know they're committed to the team goals. Like, is that enough? So that's always an
Yeah.
interesting
But where would you invest
balancing
your
act.
time? Like, I think for me, I would invest my time in the character. I think that skills can be trained and
Yeah,
developed, and character can be too. But I think it's just harder to measure. Like, if you've got a sales guy, in business, if I'm working with a sales team and we're working on high performance, if you've got a salesperson who make sales with, some unethical, maybe they're bribing, maybe they're doing things, maybe they're promising things that they can't deliver, but they're meeting their
yeah,
sales quota. How do you reward or change that behavior
yeah,
versus you've got someone who's super eager to learn, maybe they're pretty new at this, they don't know how to close the sale yet, and you've reinforced the behaviors that they're doing well. Over time, I think what you can find is that that person with a high level of integrity and character can learn the competent skills, right? So there is a time and a place, and I completely agree with you. It's like, what do you weigh more?
yeah,
And how might you apply that in how you reward players for what you want to say?
yeah. Especially if you've rewarded good performance, poor attitude, or poor ethics for a while, it's going to be a lot harder to change those behaviors for sure.
Hmm.
But let's get into this video
Yeah.
because it ties into a lot of things we've already talked about, not necessarily just this last one, right? But so the clip, I'm pretty sure it was from earlier this season, early on in the year. It was
Yeah, it's
the
from April.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's right. Early on in the season, I love it, dude. Like first month in, and we're already experiencing this. This is great. Pete Fairbanks, the closer for the Rays, he was getting interviewed after the game, had a blown save, and just his responses to what the reporters were saying, saying things like this performance was a quote all-encompassing suck, which I I giggled when I heard it. But then a lot of things he talked about, I was like, yeah, we'll try and rectify it, but for right now, I'm going to be pissed off. I'm not going to let it beat me up. I'm going to give it, what's it, 9:44. I'm going to give it 16 minutes of sulk and then get back on the bump and figure it out. You watching this clip, like, walk me through, like, what were your takeaways from what he was actually saying?
Yeah, he's super authentic in this clip, right? He's just being himself. He's
Yeah,
super pissed off. He lost the game for them in the ninth inning. He only had one inning pitched. And any player in that situation is obviously frustrated, right?
yeah,
Maybe feels a big sense of responsibility for the loss of the team. And it's obviously sucks, full suck. What I stood out to me the most, though, is when he said, I'm going to give myself 16 minutes of sulk. And he puts a stop time. I'm going to sulk for the next 16 minutes. All right, 9:44, 10 o'clock, this is over. And this is what high performers are able to do,
yeah.
is they're able to decide when does the game end for them and
Hmm.
when does the game start for me.
Yeah.
Does the game start when you wake up that day? Does it start in preparation the night before? Like, when does your performance start for you? Because we know the second biggest predictor of confidence is preparation.
Yep.
Now, oftentimes athletes after the game get stuck in the overthinking and the ruminating trap, right? Why did I do that? Why did this happen? Why did I throw that pitch? Why did he hit it? Why didn't the fielder make the play? Blah, 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 blah. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
they go to bed at night and they sit there on their pillow and they stay up probably later than they should, thinking about this one play that they wish didn't happen. And then they wake up and they're still probably thinking about it.
Yep.
And they bring it into their next performance. And it just leads to a lot of unproductive response to a failure. Right. So what he's not doing is ruminating, right? He's not going to sit there and ruminate. He gives himself a deadline. And this is a really productive way to review a performance, right? I'm only going to give myself X amount of time to think about this. To level this up a little bit, I mean, we can't ask him these questions. I would love to, but he might ask himself, like, what was good about my performance mentally, physically, and emotionally? Okay. Was I committed to my mental game plan? So did I commit to my pre-pitch routine? Did I have the right instructional or motivational self-talk that I said I was going to do? Was I committed to my breath? Did I agree with the pitch that the catcher told me to call or that we
Yeah.
decided on? Right? Physically, were my mechanics right? Like the reporter says something about, are you going to go back and review your tape or something like that?
Yeah.
And he's like, I've looked at my mechanics, man. If you've got any ideas, like, let me know.
Yeah.
I'm a pro pitcher, but yeah, let me just check my mechanics.
Yeah.
Most of the time it starts with your mindset,
Yeah.
right? And maybe this hitter just got lucky, and maybe that's all that the post-game review that you as a player are going to do. Like, I did everything that I was supposed to do. I was committed to my pre-pitch routine. I was committed to my plan. My mechanics were on point. I threw the pitch that I said I was going to pitch. I had control. And he still got a hit. Is that a successful performance? Like, that is a quality
Yeah.
pitch, right? So we can't really measure our success just based on the result. And so it's coming back to the process. What is it within your process that was working well for you? If something didn't work well for you, what was it? And then how are we going to do it differently next time is a much better way to review your performance than sitting there and trying to replay a problem that you can't solve because it already happened over and over again.
Yeah, and you have that conversation with hitters a lot too. You went 0 for 4 at the plate, but you hit 4 line drives that the center fielder made diving catches on. Is that a good performance or bad performance? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you got out every time, but like you made solid contact, right? You maintained your approach, and like the fielder just happened to make an amazing play every time. Like, there's not much you can do, you know?
Right. And it's hard
Um,
with stats, like in baseball, like your stats are on the scoreboard when you walk up to the
yeah,
box, like in a professional game. Like your stats are out there, your fans know your stats, the coaches know your stats, your family knows your stats,
yeah,
you know your stats, right? It can be so easy to be very results focused, especially when your performance depends on it. But coming back to your process, can you stay committed to your process? Can you stay committed to what a quality at bat looks like, right? Did I battle up there? Did I read my pitches? Were my mechanics on? Was my mind clear and ready? Or was I thinking about getting on base or I need to get a hit right now?
yeah.
Being able to evaluate that in a productive way helps you focus on what you can control instead of getting so attached to a fielder making a great play, for example.
Yeah, and I think him in the video allowing him that time to be upset and pissed off. So now when he goes to reflect on his performance, he's going to be more objective because even with the reporter asking him, "Hey, was it a mechanics thing?" What was his response? He's like, "I don't know, bro. If you got ideas, like I'm all ears." Like clearly there was
Yeah.
some like he was being authentic, he was joking around, but like I can't tell you right now because I'm so pissed off, right? I
Mm-hmm.
can't probably tell you, yeah, I made a good pitch. The guy just, happened to hit it, right? I don't know why I made this mistake. I'm just pissed off right now. So I think, yeah, for me, that 15, 16 minutes he gave himself, like experience that emotion, be pissed off. Like you should be pissed off,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your
Mm-hmm.
job as the closer is to come in and shut the door.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, we're out of here. Let's go home with a W. And you did not do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be upset too, right? But like, Yeah, how do we, yeah, when does it end? Allow myself to be pissed off. When does it end? Because now I can more effectively review what I just did. Did I
Yeah.
stay with my approach? Did I throw the pitch I wanted? Did I agree with it? Answering all those questions. I'll have, people I work with come up to me like, oh, I made this mistake and now I'm upset. It's like, okay, I don't see the problem. Well, I shouldn't be upset. Why not? Like you had a goal and you failed. Like, why would you not be upset? I get that. Like, that's fine. But like, yeah, how do we now keep it from bleeding over to the next thing?
Yeah. I think this is why just stay positive or like just forget about it doesn't work,
Yeah.
right? Giving yourself the opportunity to feel that emotion makes you human. And it allows you to let it go faster if you let yourself feel it. So I've also got the other athletes on the other side. No, nothing bothers me. Like, oh, it's fine. Everything's fine. They just push it down and it goes real deep. And then it comes out and it explodes in other areas, right? Either physically or mentally or
Yeah.
emotionally, right? And so there's two sides of this, right? So he's allowing himself in the video to feel some level of pissed off, right? He's expressing it with some level of humor, which is a good sign.
Yeah.
And he's just feeling it. Like I'm embracing the suck, every all encompassing suck. All of it sucked. It just sucked. Right. And he's letting himself feel it. Another approach could have been like, yep, nothing happened. Like I'm ready to go on the bump next time and it's
It's
going to be
fine.
fine.
It's fine.
Everything's fine.
I'll be better next time. It's like, maybe, but like,
Yeah, and if you're just going to push it all down, like, okay, how's that going to work for you? It's going to show
yeah.
up somewhere else in your life, whether personally, like off the field, if it's on the field, maybe you go home and you're more short with your significant other,
Yeah.
you're more short with your children if you've got kids or your dog or your fur babies or whatever that is, because you're holding that stress and you're holding it in. So allowing yourself to feel that emotion and work through it, but also putting a deadline like, I'm only going to let myself be bothered by this until this point in time. And then I'm going to think about something else. Maybe it's just like, and then I'm going to go on my phone and like scroll Instagram because I need a doom scroll. Not a great coping strategy, but if that's what you need in that moment, go for it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to put on a mindfulness. Maybe I'm going to say, hey guys, like, want to go grab something to eat? Like, let's talk about anything except for baseball. Like, we don't have to sit there and try to figure out the problem until we figured it out. It's okay for there to be an end time.
Yeah.
It actually makes you more productive to do it that way.
Yeah. Getting myself in the right mental space to actually effectively and accurately reflect on what just happened. Yeah. Because if you're still, fuming over what just happened, how is that now going to impact my results, right? Like confirmation bias. I'm always going to look at like all the bad things and why that
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, finding what are those like buffer strategies between like, I'm upset. Okay, I've identified now the game has ended and I'm going to move on to the other thing. But like, what's something I can do in that in between period to where it's like, it's not going like we talked about everything's coming full circle. Like just going go from one thing to the next. Like, what is that little
Mm-hmm.
buffer I can give in between there before I now like, okay, now let me actually reflect on what just happened.
Yeah.
We talked about this a lot in my last on with the army. Like the undoing effect, having some sort of thing that injects positive emotion, not to get you from like one end of the spectrum to the other, super negative to now super positive, but what can maybe lower the intensity of those negative emotions I'm experiencing, so I can think a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Me, it's
Yeah.
looking at
We
funny
talk
videos on
about
TikTok, right? Like
of dogs, maybe.
usually of some kind of animal. I do, man. I might text you this one I
Yeah.
saw of a cat the other day. I almost threw my phone out. I laughed so hard. But
All right, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. But I completely agree with you is that sometimes we just have to shift back to neutral.
yeah,
Sometimes our goal isn't to go from super pissed off to like, this is the best day of my life. Like, what
yeah,
an extreme change that would be. Maybe we just need to go from super pissed off and aggravated to neutral and just there, just
just be
existing,
there. Yeah,
right? And just being where our feet are so that we show up in a way that we're proud of. For example, if you're going out to dinner, a lot of youth athletes, maybe they're listening or parents are listening and they just had a really tough game and it was awful. And you go out to dinner and they're all pissed off. They don't know, I don't know what I want to eat. I don't want to eat anything. I just want to go home. Like, why are we here? Blah, blah, blah. understandable that the player is feeling super upset, maybe after a
Yeah.
poor game.
Yeah.
But maybe in the car ride home, there's a way to shift from super pissed off to just being able to sit there and be,
Yeah.
right? And so that is a place where maybe you're more proud of how you're showing up. Like, I just had the worst game of my life, but I sat here and I said thank you and I said please and I ordered my meal and I ate. And that was a win for me in
Yeah.
that moment. Versus maybe the way that I would show up if I'm super stressed and aggravated wouldn't be a way that I'm proud to treat my family, right? So just noticing how you're showing up after stress, and finding a routine that maybe helps you let it go, different coping strategies that help you just shift back to neutral, not necessarily this is awesome.
Yeah. Because I think that's an unrealistic ask of athletes, especially after you make a huge mistake or you lose or a huge failure, right? It's like, hey, yeah, you failed, but like, yeah, it's all good. Let's get on the other end. It's like that's not how people work. It's not
Yeah,
always that simple. If it
yeah.
was,
We call that
again, if it
we
wasn't
call
simple,
that
we
the
wouldn't have
writing
jobs.
reflex, right? Yeah, you're right. We wouldn't have jobs. We should probably just stop
Like there
now.
wouldn't be a need for someone in this field. This wouldn't even be a thing, right? Just like you
Yeah,
said, hey, just be better. Oh, okay, sweet. Yeah, I'll just do that.
right.
Hey, just be more positive next time. Okay, sweet. Like, yeah, I can do that. It's like, no, it's not
Yeah,
always
thanks. I
that
didn't think of
simple.
that.
Yeah, right. Why did I think of that, man? Just try
Yeah.
harder. That's an idea, right?
You see this a lot, like with people who are trying to help. It usually comes from a good place, right?
Yeah,
It's the writing reflex. I don't want you to feel pain. I don't want you to feel sadness. Hi, Bob. I don't want you to feel some level of discomfort. And so, as a helper, somebody who loves that person, they're telling them, oh, just fight through it. It's going to change. Like your luck's going to shift. It's going to
yeah,
get better. Things are going to go your way. Like just keep working. And it's like, I don't feel like you even understand me when you're
yeah,
saying that. Right. And so we don't feel validated. We don't feel acknowledged. We don't feel understood, which is a psychological need to feel like you belong somewhere. Nobody gets how I feel. And
yeah,
so, although that comes from the best place and intention of trying to move them to a better place,
yeah,
that person in that moment is not ready to get there yet. And by trying to push them there, it actually typically isolates them more. It makes them feel like nobody
yeah,
gets why this sucks so bad.
yeah. Yeah, and I've found huge benefit in just being like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you it's all good because right now it's not, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And like I think people resonate with that more. Uh, kind of along the same vein, but even with like conversations, I think we're so quick to like give people solutions when they're not doing well. I perform like shit. Hey, try this next time. It's like I don't need that right now. So I've gotten in the habit of saying like, hey, what do you need from me? Do you need solutions?
Yeah.
Do you need me to just listen? Do you need me to validate? What do you want from me right now? And
Yeah.
people are like, I think it's an awkward question to ask, but I think hey, I just need to be valid. Just let me just vent for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. And I
Get
think the
after it.
stronger, like as you build those relationships too with athletes, like when we build them over time, is you can kind of intuitively feel that, right? Like you get to know a person and what it is that they might need from you. You learn in a better way to say this, but like their love language, like I know that
Yeah.
you need praise. I know that some level of encouragement helps you move forward, and that's good for you. But then there's other players who like they need a little bit longer of acknowledgement and validation. Hey, it's understandable that you feel like a piece of crap after you just let your whole team down. Like
Yeah.
anybody in your shoes would be feeling so shitty.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, thanks. You're not trying to fix it. This feels great.
You're
Right?
not
Like
telling
you're
me to just be better?
just you.
Cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Right. But then there's other people who like that, who enjoy that motivation. Or you've also got other players who are motivated by you telling them, well, I don't think you can do that. You're right. Your coach must be right. I don't think you can do it. And then they go up there and they smash it and it's
Yeah.
great. Right. So it just really depends on what motivates the player. But I completely agree. Asking the question maybe feels awkward. What do you need from me? But sometimes that is the perfect question to
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah. And I mean, we talk about all the time, sometimes you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's an uncomfortable thing to ask of somebody. It's an uncomfortable situation to be in when like you're trying to converse with somebody who is clearly like experiencing a lot of counterproductive thoughts and emotions, right? Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
easy, but
Mm-hmm.
how do we get them to shift from being extremely pissed off or upset to like maybe just upset as opposed to being extremely pissed off, you know? But yeah, I think it's all with building the connection, knowing the person for sure. But like, hey, I want to get you out of here on this. I super appreciate your time. This was awesome. I'm glad we finally got to do this. Before I get you out of here, since we're talking, we talked a lot about like, yeah, how do you focus on things you can control? How do you properly handle failure? Things like that. Like, what is a word of advice or something people need to like leave this conversation with to help them either work on these areas or help them just get better at their mental game?
Yeah. It's hard because this isn't advice that comes directly from me, but it is something that I've learned from someone else that I really respect, is that nothing nothing happens separate from mindset, as we talked about this earlier. And so if you care about your performance, if you care about something in your life, training your mind to show up the way that you want to is really critical for living a life that you feel fulfilled in. I think sometimes we get so hooked on helping athletes be high performers, is that as an NPC, we just want them to get better, get better, get better. But for me, it's like, how do I help an athlete look back on their athletic experience without a lot of regret, that I
Yeah.
gave it everything that I had? And so if you have the opportunity to overcome some of those internal blocks, if you're not working on your mindset, this is your sign that says maybe you should. Because if you care about your performance, if things are going well, how can we make them great? How can we make them high performing?
Yeah.
So my advice would be, don't wait for a challenge to get started with a mental performance coach. Consider how working on your mental skills could help you, elevate where you're at.
Yeah. And I like that last part, elevate where you're at, because it doesn't mean that like a challenge doesn't have to be there. You don't have to be bad in terms of like a mentality to work on something like that, something like this. Bad,
Mm-hmm.
good, neutral doesn't matter. Like you can use this as a way to elevate what you're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think tying back in your point earlier about like just enjoying the moment. I just saw a clip with Bob Rotella talking about that. One of the things he focuses on with his athletes, how do I get you to have fun? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the very least, if you know how to have fun and enjoy your thing, whatever it is that you're doing, yeah, when you look back on this experience, it's going to be less about like, hey, we won, hey, we lost, hey, I enjoyed that period of time. And I think if we can do
Mm-hmm.
that, then
Yeah, I completely agree with
yeah,
that. Fun
yeah,
is underestimated, and I think the higher we go in our level of sport, the less attached we become from enjoying what it is that we do, and the more attached we become to the results and what we're getting out of it. And we need to be a certain a certain way. We should be a certain way. I call that shoulding all over ourselves.
hell yeah,
And so instead of shooting all over yourself, consider, what would it be like if you just went out there to have fun? How free could you play? What
yeah,
difference could you make in your performance and help you get the results that you do want?
yeah,
Completely agree
absolutely,
with that.
yeah, absolutely. Where can the people find you?
Oh, the people, they can find me on Instagram. That's the best way to find me, at My Mental Flex, or you can go to my website, mymentalflex.com. And I hope to hear from people, get their feedback, see what they have to say about all this. And just, Joey, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, good follow. Highly recommend. Go on the Instagram and find her. But yeah, thank you so much for hopping on and making time. It was it was it was awesome. I'd love to do it again sometime for sure. Everybody who's listening, yeah, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, rate, review, all those sort of things on all the uh streaming platforms. I don't know which ones they are, but you can find them. Just search the podcast and we're good to go. Thank you again for your time, everybody. Thank you for listening, and don't forget, today's a great day to make an impact. All right, we'll see y'all soon. Have a good rest of your day.